My son-in-law stood in my living room and shouted, "This is my house, you crazy old woman," in front of his friends. I didn't answer. I didn't argue. I just smiled once, turned around and went to my room. 3 weeks later I placed an envelope on the table. But what I remember most isn't the shouting. It isn't the laughter of the 8 men packed into my living room either. I'd heard that plenty of times before. It isn't even the words. It's the boots. Brown work boots, thick with dried mud, resting right on my mahogany table. That table wasn't just furniture. I had bought it with 11 months of Sunday overtime at the textile mill. It had held my mother's Bible, my daughter's birthday cakes, and the last meal my husband ever ate before cancer took him. In 31 years, nothing had ever been placed on it like that. Not once. Tyson looked me in the eye when he said it again. "This is my house." He waved his beer bottle around like he was showing off property. "And you're just a crazy old woman who doesn't know her place." The men laughed. My daughter Shelby was on the couch just a few feet away, staring at her phone like she hadn't heard a word. I stood there in my own home. The house I had worked 40 years for, early mornings, aching hands, endless shifts, and a life I built piece by piece. And I looked at his boots on my table. Then I made a decision. I nodded once, turned and walked to my room. In the bottom drawer of my dresser was an old ledger. I opened it and started counting. My name is Josephine Crane. Everyone calls me Jo. I'm 63 years old and I've been sewing since I was 9. 54 years of it. Not a hobby. Not a pastime. Survival. It started in my mother's kitchen on a second-hand Singer machine. By 16 I was taking paid work from women across the county. By 22 I had a proper workroom. By 30 I could have left my mill job, but I didn't. I needed both incomes. I had a child to raise alone and I understood what stability cost. My husband Gerald died when Shelby was 11. Pancreatic cancer. 4 months from diagnosis to silence. After that, it was just me, a mortgage and a room full of fabric. But I kept going. I paid the house off in 14 years, every payment on time. I still remember sitting at the kitchen table the morning I signed the final papers, my hands shaking. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so I just made coffee and sat in silence in a house that was finally mine. That was the best cup of coffee I ever had. The house itself is on Clover Street. 3 bedrooms. Nothing fancy. Just solid. I redid the floors 10 years ago. Built my sewing workshop in the old garage with my nephew and a YouTube tutorial I watched more times than I can count. It has high ceilings, north light windows, 3 industrial machines, and a cutting table perfectly leveled down to a 1/16 of an inch. That room raised Shelby as much as I did. It was also the first thing Tyson ever suggested tearing down. He came into our lives 4 years ago. Shelby was 31, he was 34. He showed up one Sunday with sweet tea and a polite smile, calling me ma'am every other sentence. I thought maybe she had chosen well. That ma'am didn't last long. At first it was small things. Loud friends showing up late. The bathroom always occupied. Ken's left on my workbench. The TV shaking the walls past midnight. When I complained, I was told I was too sensitive. Then came the money. A few hundred for dinner. 1,000 for a truck repair. Then an investment he swore would double my money. I gave him $8,000. Not 12, I still had enough sense for that. But Shelby looked at me with Gerald's eyes and I couldn't say no. I never got a cent back. When I brought it up, Shelby just sighed. "He's stressed, Mom. He's trying." After that, I started eating alone in my workshop. Then I started skipping dinner altogether. The first real outburst came 8 months before the boots on the table. It was a Tuesday. I'd been working since dawn on 8 bridesmaid dresses, due by Friday. I didn't even realize how late it was when I finally walked out of the workshop that night. My head was splitting so sharply it felt like something was trying to force its way out through my left eye. Tyson was in the living room with 2 of his friends. The music was loud enough that I could feel it in my spine. I went to him anyway. I asked politely, because I still had enough strength left in me for manners if nothing else, if he could turn it down. He looked at his friends first. Made sure they were watching. Then he looked at me. "You know what, Joe?" he said, smiling like it was funny. "Maybe you should just go to bed. Old ladies need their rest." One of his friends laughed. The other stared at the floor. I didn't argue. I didn't correct him. I just turned around and went to bed. Not because I had been defeated. Because I finally understood I was collecting something. That night I started writing everything down. A small red notebook lived in the drawer beside my bed. Every request. Every insult. Every dollar asked for, taken or never returned. Dates, times, details. 40 years of running a sewing business had taught me how to keep records that would hold up under scrutiny. So I applied the same discipline to my own home. By the time I opened my ledger on the night of the boots, there were 14 months of entries. When I added it all correctly, money, loans, groceries, repairs, insurance payments I covered because their timing was off, the total came to $152,000. I sat on the edge of my bed looking at that number. My hands didn't move. That's what I remember most clearly. Not shaking. Not trembling. Just still. In 54 years of sewing, my hands had always been working. Cutting, stitching, measuring, fixing. That night they stopped. Then I picked up my phone and called Derek. Derek Crane, my nephew. 16 years in property and real estate law. He grew up in this house on weekends. Ate at my table. Took me to appointments after my hip surgery without being asked. He answered on the first ring. I didn't summarize. I read everything. Every entry. Every detail. Every figure. When I finished, there was a long silence on the line. Then he spoke carefully. Aunt Jo, Tyson has no legal claim to this property. None. He's not on the deed. He's not paid the mortgage. What he's saying means nothing legally. I waited. He's a guest, Derek continued. At best. And guests don't get to decide ownership. Prepare the papers, I said. Another pause. You sure? He asked. Yes, I said. Shelby too. I'm sure. Then I'll have them ready by the end of the week. I thanked him and hung up. The house was still loud in the other room. Music vibrating through walls that had held this family together longer than Tyson had even existed in it. I turned off the light and lay down. For the first time in months I slept. 3 weeks passed after that call. I said almost nothing. That was harder than anything else. Tyson grew louder in the way men do when they believe nothing can reach them anymore. He started showing people through the house like it belonged to him already. Friends. Strangers. A man he called a contractor. That wall, he said one morning, pointing toward my workshop. We're knocking it down. Opening it up. I stood 10 feet away. He didn't look at me. I brought him coffee. He took it without a glance, leaning over blueprints spread across my kitchen table. He didn't notice I wasn't reacting anymore. He didn't notice I wasn't afraid. He didn't notice I had already stopped being what he thought I was. That was his first mistake. Assuming silence meant surrender. I had been sewing for 54 years. I knew better than anyone that silence is just preparation. The second outburst came on a Friday night in October. 8 of his friends. Music shaking the walls. Glass rattling in the cabinets. Even the framed photograph of Gerald and me on our wedding day trembled with every bass line. He had bottles lined up on my mother's side table, the one she had inherited from her own mother. I came out at 9:15. I need you to turn it down, I said. Tyson stood immediately, grinning for his audience. Joe, he said, spreading his arms, I've told you before. This is my house. And you're an old woman who doesn't know her place. The room laughed. Shelby was on the couch again, eyes down. I looked at her for just a second. Then I nodded. I went to the kitchen. And I came back with the envelope. The eviction notice was simple. 30 days. Filed through the county court. Signed by Derek Crane, attorney at law, on behalf of the legal owner of the property. Me. Josephine Crane. The only name that had ever mattered on that deed. For a moment nobody spoke. It didn't happen all at once. It happened in layers. First the men closest to Tyson stopped laughing. Then the ones farther back realized no one else was laughing anymore. Then the room itself seemed to change temperature. Someone reached for the speaker and turned the music off without being told. Silence filled the space like water. Shelby's face had drained completely. Mom, she said, barely audible. You're actually doing this. I kept my voice steady. I'm reminding everyone, I said, whose name is on the deed. The answer has never changed. Why? Tyson tried to recover first the way he always did, by pretending nothing had happened. Groceries started appearing after that. Expensive ones. Organic labels. Things I would never have bought myself. He fixed the sagging fence in the backyard that had been broken for 2 years. He smiled more. Called me Ma again like he could rewind time with politeness. Come on, he said once, laughing it off. You know I didn't mean it like that. I was just talking. You know how it is with the guys. I accepted the groceries. I thanked him for the fence. I did not withdraw the notice. Then came the shift. The tone changed. It was a Wednesday evening. Just the three of us in the kitchen. Tyson sat across from me with his hands pressed flat against my table. His voice was low, controlled, carefully measured, the kind of calm people use when they want something to sound reasonable that isn't. You kick me out, he said. Shelby goes with me. You know that, right? He leaned forward slightly. You'll be alone here. You'll die alone in this house. I looked at him for a long moment. You built nothing here, I said. My voice wasn't raised. Didn't need to be. Not one brick. Not one stitch. Everything in this house was made by me, or by people who loved me before you ever arrived. I paused. So yes, if Shelby chooses to leave with you, that is her choice. I will grieve it. And I will survive it. His jaw tightened. But you don't get to use her as leverage at my table. Something in him went still then. Not his usual stillness. Something colder. Sharper. That night I went to bed at 10. At 2:17 a.m. I woke up. Not from a sound I could clearly name. Not from anything I could explain. Just that instinct, sharp and practiced, that comes from living alone long enough to learn when a house is not quiet in the right way. I lay there for a moment listening. Then I got up. The kitchen light was low, just the hood glow over the stove. Shelby's bag was on the chair near the door. Same place she always left it. I wasn't looking for her things. I was looking at something sticking out of the side pocket. A sheet of paper folded wrong. Edge exposed. I pulled it out. Foley. A mortgage application. 14 pages. My house listed as collateral. My address. My parcel number. My valuation. Page 3 had a signature line for the property owner. My name was there. Josephine Crane. My handwriting. Except I had never signed it. For a second my body reacted before my mind did. Not panic exactly. Something deeper. A physical recognition of violation. I sat down at the kitchen table. The same table. I laid the papers flat and read them from the beginning carefully. The way I always read contracts. The way I learned to read when mistakes cost money. Tyson Mercer was listed as the primary borrower. The loan amount, $240,000. My house was the security. If it defaulted, and it would because I knew exactly what kind of discipline Tyson had with obligations, I would lose everything. The house. The workshop. Gerald's memory in the walls. Fable. All of it. I sat there for a long time. And I thought about every time I had been told I was overreacting. Every time I had been asked to soften what I knew was happening. Every time I had ignored my own certainty in favor of keeping peace. Not this time. This was no longer disagreement. This was fraud. I heard footsteps before I saw her. Shelby appeared in the doorway already crying. Not fresh tears, like she had been holding them back for hours. Her whole body was shaking. He said it was just paperwork, she whispered. He said it was for a business thing and he needed my help and I didn't read it. She swallowed hard. I was scared of him, Mom. Pause. I've been scared of him. Those 4 words changed the air in the room. Everything before them became something else entirely. I set the papers down. Walked to her. Pulled her into my arms. She felt small again. Not grown. Not 31. Just my daughter. She was shaking. I was not. For the first time in years I was completely still. Go pack a bag, I said quietly. You're sleeping in the workshop tonight. She pulled back slightly. What are you going to do? I glanced at the microwave clock. 2:41 a.m. I'm going to call Derek. Derek answered on the second ring. I read him every line I needed him to hear. He didn't interrupt. Not once. When I finished he asked 4 questions. Precise. Structured. Each one built the picture more clearly. Then he said, don't move anything. Don't touch the bag again. Leave everything exactly as it is. And I understood finally that the quiet had ended. I'll be there at 7 o'clock, Derek said over the phone. Officer Danielle Webb will be with me. Financial Crimes Unit. 12 years on the job. She's handled mortgage fraud before. Pause. Aunt Joe, this is not civil. This is fraud. This is forgery. There's a difference. I know the difference, I said. I know you do. Try to sleep. I didn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen under the dim hood light with my red notebook open and wrote everything again from the beginning, as if repetition could sharpen clarity. The exact moment I found the document. The page it appeared on. The way the signature looked almost right but not quite. The pressure was wrong. The curves were too cautious, too controlled, like someone imitating handwriting instead of producing it. I had signed my name roughly 10,000 times over 40 years of contracts and filings. I knew it the way I knew my own face. That wasn't it. At 6:55 a.m., Derek's car pulled up. A minute later, a county vehicle stopped behind him. Officer Danielle Webb stepped out first. She was 44, composed in a way that didn't change when situations became tense. People like her don't look like they're arriving at something unusual. They look like they've already accounted for it. No hesitation. No reaction. Just readiness. She introduced herself briefly, then asked for the document. I handed it over. She didn't touch it directly. She opened a clear evidence bag from her pocket and placed it inside first, as if the chain of custody had already begun before she even looked at it. Then she studied page 3. When was the last time you used this property as collateral? She asked. Never, I said. My name has been on the deed since 1991. It has never been used for any loan. She nodded once and wrote it down. Do you have verified signature samples? Yes. I retrieved 3 from my workshop filing cabinet. Old contracts. Clean originals. She compared them silently. Her expression didn't change, but her pen moved steadily across the page. After a moment she asked, Where is the other occupant? Derek glanced toward the hallway. He's in the house, he said. Officer Webb adjusted her stance slightly. I need to speak with him. Derek looked at me. I gave a small nod. Let her do her job, he said quietly. The knock on the bedroom door was controlled. Not loud. Not soft. Just official. Tyson opened it within half a minute. Fully dressed. Which told me everything I needed to know. He had either heard us or he had been awake long before we arrived. He saw the uniform first. Then Derek. And me. And something in his face shifted. Not immediately. Not dramatically. But unmistakably. Like a man realizing the ground beneath him had already been marked and he hadn't noticed the lines being drawn. He went to the closet without speaking, pulled out a duffel bag and started packing fast. No planning. No order. Just motion. No one stopped him. He crossed the kitchen with the bag slung over his shoulder, eyes fixed forward. At the front door he paused. Turned. This isn't over, he said. I reached to the counter, picked up the evidence bag and held it up so he could see it clearly. It already is, I said. He left. The door shut behind him with a sound that didn't feel like impact. It felt like closure. For a moment nobody spoke. Then the house settled, not into emptiness but into something else. A stillness that felt structured. Contained. Derek had brought 2 filings that morning. Tyson had only seen one. The second was already in motion. A civil fraud complaint filed through the county court, listing Tyson Mercer as respondent for forgery, misrepresentation and unlawful financial encumbrance of real property. The criminal referral followed within the week. The district attorney assigned the case personally. Howard Banks had been in the office 22 years. The kind of prosecutor whose presence made paperwork feel heavier just by association. He called me himself to confirm details. The handwriting analysis came from the county forensic unit. Dr. Carmen Reyes handled it. 18 years of questioned documents. Hundreds of courtroom testimonies. The kind of expert who didn't speculate, she concluded. Her report ended in one sentence that stayed with me long after I read it. The signature on page 3 bears no consistent characteristics with known exemplars of the subject's handwriting. The questioned writing is consistent with deliberate simulation by an individual unfamiliar with the natural writing habits of the signer. Deliberate simulation. In plain terms, someone had tried to copy my name without ever truly knowing how it was written. Tyson Mercer was formally charged with first-degree forgery and fraudulent use of financial instruments. Both charges were felonies in our state. Tyson was arraigned on a Thursday morning. He pleaded not guilty and was released on bond. His attorney, Patrick Sewell, a man who had already handled financial fraud cases in this county twice before, entered negotiations with Howard Banks the following month. What came out of it was a plea agreement. 1 count of attempted mortgage fraud. 18 months of supervised probation. Restitution for verified financial losses. And a permanent mark on his record. A mark that would follow him through every background check. Banks, employers, landlords. Anywhere money or trust mattered. He would never walk into a financial institution again without that history speaking before he did. A man who had tried to take a house would now carry proof that he could not be trusted near one. The eviction order remained in place. He was given the original 30-day window to remove what was left of his things. He sent his cousin to collect them. Shelby didn't come home right away. She stayed with a friend from her office for 2 weeks. Just enough distance to breathe again. Enough space to stop living inside someone else's version of reality and start noticing her own thoughts returning. She saw a therapist during that time. Dr. Amara Osai. She worked with coercive control cases. People who had been slowly worn down without realizing it was happening. According to Shelby, Dr. Osai had a way of asking questions that didn't complicate things. They simplified them. Sometimes painfully so. When Shelby came back, it was a Sunday evening in November. She stood in the kitchen doorway with 2 bags at her feet, looking around like she was seeing the space for the first time again. Her eyes were the same ones she'd had since she was small. Gerald's eyes. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said. I shook my head once. "I know," I said. "You didn't see it. Or you saw it and didn't let yourself understand what you were seeing." Pause. "I know that too." She stepped inside slowly, her gaze moving across the kitchen. The clean table, the salt and pepper shakers, the small vase of dried lavender, the soft hum of the hood vent. "It feels like your house again," she said quietly. "It was always my house," I replied. "Come on. I'll make coffee." The restitution came 4 months later. Not all of it. Tyson's lawyer had negotiated the number down to what they could directly trace and document from my accounts. $87,400. The rest, what they called lifestyle contributions and disputed transfers, was excluded. I accepted it. Not because it was complete. Because continuing to fight for the rest would have cost more in time, energy, and legal fees than what was left was worth. And at 63, I understood something very clearly. Not every missing piece is worth the price of retrieving it. Derek came by after the settlement was finalized. He told me something I didn't expect. The bank had flagged the mortgage application before it ever fully moved forward. Their internal system had already triggered a verification with the county deed office. Even if nothing else had happened, if we hadn't intervened when we did, it would have been caught. I looked at him for a moment. "So he was never going to succeed," I said. "Almost certainly not," Derek replied. A pause settled between us. "He still did it," I said. Derek nodded slowly. "Sometimes people do things that were never going to work. That doesn't make them any less dangerous while they're doing them." That stayed with me. The mahogany table still carries a small scar on its left edge. A mark from where Tyson's boot caught it that night. Everything changed. For a while I considered repairing it, sanding it down, making it disappear. I didn't. Because the table survived it. And the mark remains, not as damage but as evidence that something tried to break it and failed. That feels honest. The workshop is still here. 12-foot ceilings. North-facing windows. The cutting table. The machines that still hum when I ask them to. I've been sewing for 54 years. I don't see any reason to stop. On the first Sunday in December, Shelby and I sat at the mahogany table and drank coffee without talking about any of it. We didn't need to. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been for a long time. Not empty. Not heavy. Just settled. The kind of quiet that belongs to something that knows exactly what it is.